Hello. Good day, everybody. My name is Graham Wallington, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Wild Earth. I'm going to be speaking to you today about our story of what Wild Earth does, what Wild Earth is all about, what our mission is, and really where we're taking it next. And in fact, you'll be hearing some things that nobody has yet heard about, some of our exciting new plans that are still in the works, specifically around adding a new business line, which is around the sale of non-fungible tokens, which I'll get on towards the end. But let's start at the beginning. I think that before I do, I just want to, I don't actually know if I've got any interactivity controls here. I'm just having a look to see if there is any sign of a chat room. I see presenter chat. Okay, there we go. Got it. Live Q&A. So what I'll do is I'll hold that up. There's quite a lot of story that I want to tell you. So what I'll do is I'll kind of do it in chunks, and as we get through it, and as I get to sort of the end of a piece, I'll say, are there any questions, and then answer any questions that have come through on that live Q&A at the bottom. Okay. Let me kick off first of all by saying what our mission is, and I think it's really important that before I get into the whole context of how we achieve it, you really understand what it is we're trying to do, and that is that Wild Earth is trying to increase the value of nature to people. So Richard, if that's you in the background, is there any chance you can go on mute? It's just exceedingly difficult for me to concentrate. Sorry if I can hear anything else. Sorry. So Wild Earth is on a mission to increase the value of nature to people, and we do that by scaling ecosystem services without scaling the harm to nature. Let me explain what I mean. What I mean is this, is that when people go for, the Japanese call it Shinrin Yoku. It is the art of forest bathing. It is when you walk through the forest, you receive the benefits of nature, which are relaxing. There's measurable drops in your cortisol levels. And there is a real mental health, which leads to a physical health benefit of being present in nature. I'm sure we've all felt this, and we understand what this means, going for a walk in the park. Now, when people go on a safari, or they go diving, or they go for a walk in the bush, there is an impact on nature. So, for example, on a safari vehicle, if people book a safari, there might be 8 people that are on that vehicle, and there are 4 tires that are impacting onto the ground. And so there's a certain level of harm that is necessary driving across the environment, and even putting in that road network and the lodge, of course, and the sewerage, and the bringing in all of the servicing and so on. There's a lot of harm that is associated with tourism and with people being in the environment. And so what we're specifically able to do is that we're, with the same vehicle, so with the same 4 tires in the ground and with only 2 people on that vehicle, we're able to scale the ecosystem services from that experience in nature to a theoretically unlimited millions of people that can enjoy, maybe not quite to the same full degree, of course, of what it feels like to be there, where you can smell and feel and touch, but where people can feel present in nature, and we can scale that feeling of being remotely present in nature. We're able to scale those ecosystem services of nature without increasing the harm. And that itself increases the value of nature to people. So that formula at the heart of our mission this formula of saying, how do we make more people around the world feel remotely present in nature, just like the safari that some of you may have watched just before talking to me, is that people, how do we make more people feel like they're there in nature and get the benefits that that provides without scaling that harm? And to do that, how do we achieve that mission? Is that we've really focused in on understanding and really getting to deeply understand 4 psychological cues that help to create this remote experience, this remote consciousness experience in nature. And those 4 elements, very briefly, are live broadcasting, interactivity, a point of view style of shooting, and the ritual of a daily schedule. And so the live broadcasting is very obvious, really. It creates telepresence. So just like this broadcast, you're watching me live, and it creates telepresence. If we were on a telephone call, we would both feel that we were physically present in one place, but that by being connected through a live broadcast, we have a telepresence in a third remote location where our remote consciousness is. Secondly is interactivity, and this is in 2 layers. The top layer is obvious. It's where we allow people to ask questions of our naturalists and we answer some of those questions in real time. So John in Ohio could ask, why do zebras have stripes? And our naturalist, that question will be routed through to the naturalist via the control room. Well, they don't route all questions through, but some of the questions are routed through. And then the naturalist will turn live, as you will have seen if you watched earlier. They'll turn live and they'll answer John's question by name. So they'll say, John in Ohio, wants to know why zebras have got stripes, and well, the answer is da da da. And so on the first level, the interactivity, obviously for John, makes John feel that much more present and engaged with that moment. But beneath that is a very important factor, and that is that all the audience that either didn't know about it, or in other words, all the audience that didn't have their question asked or answered, but they're aware that John asked the question, is that they feel a sense of community. In other words, I'm not watching this alone. I'm watching this with other people, and this in turn leads to a great deal of Facebook groups and pages, hashtag Wild Earth on Twitter, where a lot of people communicate, the chat rooms on YouTube and on Twitch and on Periscope and so on and so forth, Twitter that is. And so a large amount of communities that aren't created by, and now Discord, that are not created or managed by Wild Earth, but that spring up as a consequence of this community aspect. Thirdly, also in 2 layers, I'll be quick though, is a point of view style of shooting. And I see, Martin, you've asked a question, and I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to wait until I've finished explaining these 4 cues, and then I'll answer all the questions about the cues before moving on to the monetization and the business part of it. So the third cue is this point of view style of shooting, which is in 2 layers. And the first one is obvious. That is that the camera is positioned in a place on, for example, the safari vehicle, or when we at the back of the vehicle, which is where the guest would sit, or when we dive through the sea forest and we dive through the kelp forest, we position the camera in such a way that it's the same point of view that a person participating in that experience would have if they were physically there. This cue helps people, quite understandably, to feel more able to be remotely present, because they can use that point of view to help make themselves feel like they're there. But also underneath that is an important thing, which is that we never cut between camera feeds, live feeds or camera angles in a single sighting. This is really important because human beings are trained when they watch a scene, a sighting of an animal or anything, where there are multi-camera views or there's cuts between camera views, that is editing, and editing is associated with television. Whereas just like you watching me now, there's no editing, and on a Zoom call or on a Teams call, that lack of editing tells us we are present in a meeting. So we're being trained and culturally conditioned into seeing television as where there's editing, and where there's no editing as being a real experience. And so we utilize that where we only cut between geographical locations, not between camera feeds in a single geographical location. Important thing to recognize in terms of how we utilize that psychological cue to help to make people feel present in nature remotely. And then the fourth cue is an important one, really important one, and that is ritual. And that is that we do this broadcast every single day with these broadcasts. So we do 2 safaris, 2 live safaris like the one you saw. We do a 3-hour live safari every single morning, a sunrise safari. And then we do a 4-hour sunset safari every single day. And we also do a live 1-hour sea forest show, which is from every single day at 1:30 Central African time for an hour until 2:30 Central African time. And we also, and that's a live broadcast from underwater in free diving in Cape Town in the kelp forest. And then we're about to add in the next few days, in the next week, a daily 1-hour show with penguins, only penguins, just talking about penguins, just after our sunrise safari every single day. Now, these are deadly reliable. So they happen 365 days a year. They happen on Christmas Day, and particularly the safaris, which we've been doing since the inception of Wild Earth in 2007. So on the 27th of April 2007, we began this regime of doing 2 daily live safaris, and we do it every single day. And our viewers rely upon that ritual, that consistency, that predictability, not of what we're going to see, but that we're going to go out and see what we can see. And this is really important because the combination of making people feel present in nature and that ritual reliability combined together to create what is not really an entertainment product, but more a mental healthcare product. And that's how our viewers use our product. They use it as a way to relax, a way to escape into nature. And we're very clear about the fact that we increase the value of nature by giving people this mechanism whereby they can escape into nature without scaling the harm that we do to it. So that's 15 minutes, and I've explained, I hope, what our mission is and how we go about executing that mission in terms of our channel. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the whole business side of it. So the whole business model behind this, how it's changed over the years, where we are now, and where we're about to go to. But before I do, I'd love to answer any questions you may have. And I see that Martin's asked, how do your naturalists feel about the engagement, Graham? Does it work for them as well? It's interesting. So Martin, what's crucial is that our naturalists are not presenters. They're not actors. We don't employ people from the television industry or seek out people that are actors. And the reason for that is because we are live. We don't wish to contrive anything. We don't wish to make anything up. We're not here to perform or to entertain. And what we're trying to do is connect people with nature. And in order for that to occur, we need that authenticity. So the engagement is very important because to our naturalists, because they need to believe that they're connecting with real people who are really feeling like they're present. So the engagement is critical, and it's important from the perspective of the naturalist, in light of your question, that when that they know this is a real person on the other side. So we don't really like too many fake names like Mama Safari and so on. We really try to look for people that have given us their real names, so that that our naturalists can feel a real connection with real people on the other side. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so that's the only question there. So what I'll do is I'll blunder along, and I'll move into the business aspect of this. So first of all, a very brief history, which is important, is that I actually co-founded a company called Africam.com in August of 1998. And it was called Africam.com, and the concept here was simply that we had a webcam pointed at a waterhole on the same property, Djuma Game Reserve, that we still broadcast from 23 years later. Except at that stage, the technology was such that we were only able to send out a JPEG, stills image, every 30 seconds, with no audio. And every 30 seconds, we would also serve an additional advert, a banner ad. And so back in 1998, we had a linkage between our costs, the serving of the JPEG, and the revenue that came from having a banner ad. And what happened was that we very quickly became, the Africam was the busiest website on the African continent in 98. We already had 45 million page views per month, which today would be a big number. Back then it was an exceedingly big number. And what happened was that very soon thereafter, streaming came along. And the pre-roll ad was only invented in 2008, so 10 years after we started, which meant that for a long time, we could not match our revenues from banner ads, which were outside of the stream, with our costs, which was the cost of delivering the stream to the users. And that meant that the better quality content we made, the more engaging our content was, the more money we would lose. Because it would mean that people would watch for longer. And if we only got money from when they arrived at the stream, which would be at the beginning, even when the pre-roll was invented, it was the same. You'd get money at the beginning with your pre-roll or from your banner ad on the page. And then the longer the viewers watched, the more money it cost to serve them, but you weren't increasing your revenue. So eventually you would run into a deficit and you would just lose more and more money the more engaging your content was. Fast forward to 2014, where we began to license our programming to the likes of National Geographic, SABC, Tencent in China, CCTV in China, but most importantly, National Geographic. They became our biggest content licensee, and we licensed them two kinds of content. On the one hand, we licensed them digital content, so our daily live safaris, which they broadcast onto their website, onto YouTube, onto Facebook, onto Twitter, etc., etc. But we also licensed to them several finished live television shows, which they would then broadcast onto Nat Geo Wild, one of their television channels. And unfortunately, for a long time in history, it hasn't been possible to effectively monetize the digital streaming of content in general, and ours in particular, and certainly not when it's distributed onto third-party social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, etc. There are those that would say that the only people that make money out of streaming on Facebook is Facebook. And so although Nat Geo managed to build a monster audience around our live safaris, at that stage known as Safari Live, they weren't able to monetize it on social media. So it fell to the television side, the traditional side of their business, to be able to find the revenues that would justify the ongoing license of our programming. And we worked very hard from 2014 to 2019 with the Nat Geo team to try to find ways to do that, but ultimately encountered two immovable problems. The one problem I mentioned was the inability to monetize Safari Live on the National Geographic third-party social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, etc. And the second problem was that the audience, the television audience's expectations were for a live African wildlife show, which to them meant during daylight hours. People in the United States, on the East Coast of the United States, in the prime television viewing, had an expectation that if they were going to watch a live safari, that it needed to be during daylight. Perfectly understandable. The problem is that to make the time zones work between the prime daylight African viewing time, which would be dawn, at dawn in Africa, to make that work with the East Coast US prime time television just wasn't really possible. And only really during the American winter, with the East Coast due to daylight savings, were we able to deliver African dawn at 10 p.m., which is just at the end of prime time on the East Coast. And in the middle of the American summer and the African winter, we were only able to get in at midnight, which was outside of prime time. So simply the budgets to acquire this content outside of prime time weren't adequate to sustain this. And so in 2019, after a great deal of effort, Wild Earth began the journey, and it's been a difficult one, to go from a B2B model where we were licensing programming to National Geographic to a direct-to-consumer B2C model where we were reliant upon a combination of now advertising revenue, which took us time to build and still continues to be an effort to build. The subscription revenues that we get from our explorers, who are monthly contributors and subscribers, which we call explorers. And thirdly, the explorers plus the founders and a variety of different viewer fans, people that are really committed to Wild Earth, that super value the service that we provide, which to many, as I mentioned earlier, they see as a mental health rather than a entertainment service, have contributed and donated large amounts of money to help us to stay on air. So we really, over the past 2 years, have undergone a massive transformation of our business model. Initially, it was a shock transformation with crowdfunding. As we lost this contract, this B2B contract, we went into a mode of crowdfunding through Kickstarter and Indiegogo. We had quite a lot of experience with that beforehand, as well as the development of our Explorer program and our advertising model for our business, and really shifted to this direct-to-consumer business model. And really, where we are now is we are continuing to build out 3 key revenue legs in our business that we stand upon. The one is our channels, which is funded through advertising and subscriptions from our explorers. The second is expeditions, which is where we invite our viewers to book expeditions with us, where they can come out and be a part of the team that is contributing these live broadcasts onto our channel. And we're expanding that. We've been doing it for quite a considerable time now at our kind of home base at Djuma Game Reserve in South Africa in the Sabi Sands. But from 2022, we're now expanding that to also include inviting viewers to join us on expeditions to our other home base, which is in the Masai Mara in Kenya, which can help to enable us to bring that contribution back onto our channel. And we've got some super exciting new locations, including going to bring polar bears onto Wild Earth for the first time from Svalbard, to adding the Pantanal in Brazil so that we can see jaguars and other also contributing onto our channel. And the third leg is tokens, and I'm going to come to that separately. What I'd rather do now is answer any questions about the sort of the main business part of what we do, and then once we've covered that, then I'll move on to where are we going from a business point of view. We have a question here from David JG Simmons. Fascinating. How do you see the effects of the pandemic playing out with your current business model? Less travel awareness of climate change, carbon footprints, etc. Very interesting question, David. And I promise you, David is not a plant in the audience. So there's a couple of answers to that question. First of all, what we noticed straight away when the pandemic hit was a massive demand for access to nature and a realization globally that nature shouldn't be taken for granted. In fact, over a 1 month period between March 2020 and April 2020, we saw a 5-fold global increase in our audience, 500% growth in our audience in 1 month. And it's just kept growing. Not at that rate, but it's kept growing. So the immediate impact of the pandemic is an increase in demand for access to nature. And of course, because of the lockdowns, there's been a reduction in the supply of access to nature. So while Earth's core business model of scaling ecosystem services without scaling the harm caused by direct access is perfectly in line with what the pandemic is doing to the way we consume content and how we behave. The second part of answering your question, David, is that what we're building is a concept which is a pandemic-proof exploration vehicle. Now, what does that mean? It means that what we're going to do is we're going to build a submarine where in your local city, you can go in and book to spend a day in the submarine, staying in there on a real expedition to Challenger Deep, where the portholes that you're looking at are actually live feeds coming from that submarine in Challenger Deep. And the captain that you're talking to, the naturalist that's steering the submarine that you're sitting with in London, they're actually steering that submarine in the Challenger Deep, the real one. And we think that we can use this concept of making people feel remotely present in nature as a way to not only scale ecosystem services, but also build pandemic-proof exploration vehicles. And I hope that answers your question. Okay, so that was David's question there, and that's on our business model sort of up till now, which has been very focused on shifting from B2B to B2C, specifically around advertising and subscription revenues on our channel, and then also using that channel to increase our average revenue per user by upselling those users and those explorers to actual physical expedition experiences to contribute onto the channel. And in 20 years ago, sorry, I'm struggling to know where to begin on this story. But 20 years ago, I was approached by Eric Bettelheim, who is an American lawyer who's lived in England for a long time, to work on a project that was all about finding a way to pass benefits back to conservation on a grand scale, utilizing something that he at the time called, 20 years ago, green beans. And of course, it wasn't possible to implement this idea at that time, even though it was an amazing idea, because we didn't have the technology that we now have in the form of blockchain technology. And so over the past few months, Wild Earth has been in stealth mode, developing a concept that we're about to release to the world. And I'm actually talking about it for the first time with anybody outside of our organization right now. And this concept is where what we're going to do is, well, over the last many years, we have been broadcasting from the same places. And as a result, we've gotten to know individual animals really well. In fact, our viewers watch the same individual leopards and lions and hyenas and many others every single day. And it's really through our naturalists providing our viewers with the insights into the challenges and opportunities that these individual animals have that has helped our viewers to empathize with those animals as individuals rather than as representatives of their species. And what we've done is we've built a registry of these individual animals. And obviously that keeps expanding as we identify more and more individual animals that are seen on the Wild Earth channel. And what we're about to do is we're about to start minting limited editions of non-fungible tokens for each of these individual animals in our registry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give away and also sell these non-fungible tokens to our viewers and other collectors who want to follow those animals on Wild Earth and have a sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility for those animals. Because you see, 40% of the gross sales price on the first sale goes to the habitat custodians as an incentive to conserve that productive wildlife habitat that created that individual animal. And as long as those habitat custodians maintain they conserve their productive wildlife habitat and they remain compliant with a conservation agreement that they need to enter into with Wild Earth in order to benefit from this, they will also not only receive that initial 40% of the gross selling price of all those non-fungible tokens from animals that are on their property, living on their property, but also 9% of every single transaction, every single exchange of that token into the future is paid, well, actually 10% is paid back into the Wild Earth wallet. And of that 90% or 9% of the gross selling price is paid to the custodians as an incentive to conserve the productive wildlife habitat. And this means that that there is, what we're trying to build here is a third sustainable revenue source for incentivizing the conservation of wildlife habitat. The first being hunting, which is obviously a consumptive use of the wildlife, but has and can be sustainably farmed as an incentive to conserve the habitat. So we provide an alternative to hunting. Also, we are a mutually exclusive alternative, which means that if the land custodian, the habitat custodian, wants to benefit from the revenues from Wild Earth's tokenomics program, then they need to forego any hunting of those animals, because we can't be incentivizing the conservation of those animals and at the same time having them being killed. And the second existing revenue source that incentivizes the conservation of productive wildlife habitat is tourism, and tourism, as mentioned right at the beginning, is a good incentive, but it also comes with a whole bunch of impacts, negative impacts, harm that is impacted upon the environment. And that in turn is obviously a problem when you want to try and scale that revenue source, because if you're making X with 10 people at a time, but you need to make 3X in order to be able to make your business viable, then that means that you need to increase the number of the harm to the environment by 3 times. And our offer here, our proposal, our proposition, is a mechanism which allows for the trading in animals without any harm to those animals or the habitat, and that it provides a very real world linkage to these non-fungible tokens, where the collectors of these tokens can know that they are having a real and meaningful direct impact. It's not charity, it's an incentive, it's a revenue source. It's paid in fiat currency, not crypto, so that we can avoid any possible money laundering. It's paid locally so that it can't be held offshore, so that the colonial externalization of value can't occur here, or at least can't occur easily here. And that this is that the collector is buying a very high quality token. And what Wild Earth aims to do with these tokens is to basically supply the market for non-fungible tokens, which seems to have a very high demand at the moment, with these very high quality tokens that have a real, actual, measurable, transparent impact on the conservation of productive wildlife habitat in the world. And at the same time, provide them to the market at a fair price. In fact, although it's not decided, we're looking at bringing these tokens to the market at £20 per token, which if you've been following any of the excitement on OpenSea and the rest of the non-fungible token market, this would make it extremely well priced for such a high quality token. So that's our plans, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions. I see Martin over here is already down for one NFT for today's leopard that Tristan found for us. And Martin, that's excellent. I didn't actually watch the show, I apologize. So I'm not actually sure which leopard that was, or if that leopard is part of our first 22 animals. So we're going to be launching with 22 animals, 22 editions of tokens, and I'm not sure if that one's in. But guys, if there's anybody that's got any questions about that, I'd love to answer. Hi, David.
I'm just coming on screen, Martin, to well, firstly to thank you, but also to funnel any questions through that anybody might ask. I mean, I've got one myself, if I can kick off. I mean, I think your last concept is fascinating, but it's quite a hard sell. It's quite complex. It requires quite a lot of explanation. So how do you intend actually to market it?
Okay, so that obviously is where the rubber hits the road, and you're right. And I'm going to answer that question in two parts. The first of all, I'm going to say that I'm an old campaigner. So Africam was part of Web 1 back in 1998, and we grew through the whole Web 2 social media phase. And really, what's so interesting about this Web 3 phase that we're entering now, this DeFi, this crypto, I mean, I still think we're figuring out what even to call it, is that I'm finding that all the entrepreneurs and the salespeople and the people that are trying to bring these products and technologies to the market are focusing a great deal on the very complicated, very unresolved technologies that underpin this. And this is creating quite a lot of confusion amongst potential collectors in the market. And it's surprising because in Web 1 and Web 2, you didn't hear people talking about HTML and common gateway interfaces and TCP/IP protocols when we were talking about the World Wide Web. And so that's a bit of a confusing element for me in this Web 3 that definitely exists. And so part of what we want to do in terms of our go-to-market strategy with these tokens, in addition to supplying very high quality tokens in that they're linked to the real world and they make a real impact in the real world, and delivering those high quality tokens at a very good price, which we think those two factors alone are probably likely to make a market, considering just how much demand exists at the moment for NFTs, particularly if you can imagine them coming to the market at £20 when the average is selling at multiples of that, many multiples of that. But what we're also going to do is we're going to do two other very important things. Number one is we're going to sell these tokens in fiat currency. So we're going to sell these tokens in the exact same way as one would sell any other widget. And that is what they are. They're a product. And we're going to sell them as such. And this alone, you'll be surprised, that one fact will make a huge difference to many of our viewers in particular, but probably many other people as well, who would otherwise be a little bit reticent to get involved. And the second linked thing we're going to do is that we're not going to require that you have a wallet in which to receive the NFT at the time that you buy it. This is important because if one makes the presentation of a suitable wallet a requirement for the buyer to buy the NFT, then it requires that the buyer, the collector, has already established a wallet on that particular blockchain on which that NFT has been minted. And Wild Earth is not going to commit to any one particular blockchain or technology. We're going to allocate or create a limited edition that will never be expanded of non-fungible tokens, and then mint those onto a variety of different blockchains, and not mint some that will be minted at a later stage for blockchains that are yet coming. And our thesis is that blockchains are all interoperable in the future, and that the technology is not the deciding factor. It's the quality of the underlying token that matters, not the technology on which it's been minted. And therefore, our buyers, our collectors, will receive a highly secure process by which they can unlock that non-fungible token into a wallet at any stage from immediately. So for those who wish to have it in a wallet instantly, they can do so. Or those that wish to do so 10 years hence when they finally get round to asking their niece to do it for them. And we're trying to make it as frictionless as possible. Oh, I think you're on mute there, David. Sorry.
Any other questions from the floor, from people watching? We've got about 5-10 minutes left. Martin says, fully agree, Graham. It is the underlying assets value and use, not the technology, that counts. Yeah,
that's totally correct. You know, I think that what we're going to see happen here is that it is the utility in the token that ultimately provides the value to the collector. Right now, I think we're in a bit of a speculative, bubble where many people aren't even giving any thought to the quality of the tokens that they're speculating in, and that is expressly not what we're trying to participate in. And we are expressly focused on the long term and the creation of utility, fair value in these non-fungible tokens.
can I come back just with one supplementary as well? Because I was fascinated to hear you say that you were in the, I think, mental well-being business, really fundamentally. And I just wonder, the sophistication of the tokens, the awareness that people have of that. How does that sit with your target audience, if you like, of people concerned with their mental well-being? How do you bridge that gap?
Okay, absolutely. So it's firstly, it's not a gap; it's a funnel, and really the process that we go through is, I like to say that Wild Earth is a cryptic Zen temple, or cryptic Buddhist temple, and cryptic because it's not apparent from the outset. And a Buddhist temple because after a while you suddenly find it becomes a place where you're mindful and where you're present in nature, and that's the mental health portion that is at the front of our funnel. So we invite people in, they get hooked in to see animals, and they end up staying for the nature. And then once that happens, is that we take them on a journey which is really all about trying to get them to empathize with nature, to empathize with those animals, because it's all about empathy. And this is an extension that's only really possible after that mental well-being phase of getting them into that mindful state, is to now achieve an empathetic state. To empathize with these animals requires that you first see them as individuals. And that is an exercise, because we've got a lot of cultural artifacts that we need to unpick. For example, a lot of people misinterpret the naming of wild animals as being anthropomorphism, or the extension of human traits to an animal, which of course it's not. It's just that by having a name for an animal, we are able to identify it from others in its species. And that's important for storytelling. And so what we find is that human beings can only empathize with those individuals after A, identifying it as an individual, and then B, being able to see insights into the challenges and opportunities that individual animal faces. So essentially, once we achieve that goal, they suddenly empathize with that animal. And just so that I can give a real world example of why that's important, is that just recently, well, actually, almost not a day goes by over the last 23 years where I haven't received a message from one of our viewers speaking about just how important these live broadcasts are in their lives. But more recently, there was a lady that I won't identify, but who suffers from extreme chronic drug-resistant pain. On the pain scale, I think she said it was an 8 or a 9, and no amount of drugs can deal with this pain. And she had found that by watching Wild Earth on a daily basis, she'd had some inroads against that pain. She was able to reduce some of that pain to some extent. But it's only when she began to empathize with the leopards, and when she began to follow the individual leopards' lives, and when she noticed that when they got injured, they just carried on. They didn't stop. They didn't lie with their feet in the air and demand that the NHS come over. They got on with it, and just that empathy on her part resulted in a 50% reduction in her chronic drug-resistant pain, which she's managed to maintain to this day. So that sense of ownership, that seeing the individual animal, that this tokenization project is all about, and making people feel that they are helping to conserve that individual animal, not all animals or all of that species, but Jack, is we think an extension of our mental health product.
Great, thank you. Any last questions before we wrap up? I will just wait 1 minute. Just while I do so, can I, on behalf of the consortium, thank you, and please convey this to your team in the world for their wonderful work this afternoon. It was fascinating. We didn't see an enormous number of things, but then that, to me, was half the experience. It is always going to be potluck. It wasn't entertainment, it was reality. And it was, as we, it unfurled before our eyes. And the fact that we saw a leopard, the fact that we saw an elephant was really exciting to be able to do so from the comfort of our own homes. But thank you. Will you pass on our grateful thanks to them? I would also like to thank the University of Stellenbosch and Martin Butler and his colleagues for setting this up. This is the most ambitious thing we've done, and it's only done because of you. So thank you very much indeed, Graham, for sharing your thoughts with us.
And likewise, thank you very much for giving us a platform to share with the future leaders of this world our humble idea and our humble mission. You never know, that we have a consortium of investors in our business that we're all part of InSeed at Oxford University, which I think is part of what you do, that we're all part of a project with Wild Earth, and these connections, you never know where they end up out there. So for those of you that are watching, I hope there was some value to it, and we're very grateful and humbled by the opportunity.
Thank you, Graham. And if I could just finish by encouraging all our participants today to follow up on what you've seen from today's sessions. They will be posted on our timeline within the next few hours. I presume that's okay, Graham, if we share your thoughts. Is that all right?
Of course.
Yep, no problem. And tomorrow, I hope you'll come back, because tomorrow we've got some music and dance. We're going to have an introduction to Russian ballet. What could be more different but more similar in some ways? Grace and beauty, but of a human kind. And also an introduction to what's called the New Orleans Jazz of Brazil. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, but well, I should perhaps try, but it's the Casa de Chorro. But for any Brazilians in the audience will probably be laughing wildly at my total mispronunciation. But thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you, all you guys, back tomorrow. And once again, Graham, thank you very much indeed for sharing your fascinating thoughts and amazing business model. It's really, really very interesting to see someone who is so sort of totally dedicated to what they do, beyond just a job of work, but part of, you know, your values, your beliefs, your whole emotional life, spiritual life bound up with that. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.